Welcome to Politics and Why. New York Gets a Green Light for Cannabis Series Part 2. Our focus today is New York Growth and Cultivation Landscape, sponsored by Fluence. So as many of you know, recent regulatory and market shifts have made New York one of the country's hottest cannabis markets. New cannabis players need to quickly and correctly adopt cultivation best practices to have a chance at capitalizing on New York's projected $1.7 billion cannabis market. This panel combines the expertise of Fluence's Jen Bassuk, Global Business Development, and Ryley Leech, Cannabis Solutions Architect, who will discuss the intricacies of building a successful growing environment and leveraging their business in a developing market. They're joined by New York regulatory expert Kaelan Castetter and design build professional Brad Berg. Participants will learn about the science of cultivation, the importance of lighting and other environmental factors in optimizing their grow, as well as business and regulatory insights to help to set up a successful New York cannabis business. Fluence, our sponsor today, thank you very much, Jen, and to the entire Fluence team, develops powerful energy-efficient LED lighting solutions and research applications for controlled environment commercial crop production. Fluence is a leading LED supplier in the global market and is committed to enabling the world's top vertical firms and greenhouse growers to optimize their operations and understandings. By applying the latest research in photobiology, evidence-based design, and patented engineering, Fluence strives to help the world grow smarter. Their mission is rooted in the values of curiosity, integrity, service, and passion. Fluence envisions a bright future where the intersection of light and life yields a healthier and more sustainable world. So today's panelists include, and welcome to all of them, Jennifer Bassuk, who's the Global Business Development leader at Fluence, Ryley Leech, Cannabis Solutions Architect from Fluence, as I had mentioned, Kaelan Castetter, Managing Director from Castetter Cannabis Group, and Bradley Berg, Project Developer from Arco Murray National Construction Company. So welcome everyone, and I'm very excited to hear from today's panelists. And before I ask the first question to Jen, let me just tell you a little bit about Jennifer Bassuk and her role for Fluence. So Jennifer is an evangelist for agricultural innovation and turned her long-standing interest in urban farming into her professional focus after more than a decade at Amazon. Jen now spearheads global business development initiatives for Fluence and connects the dots between investors and cultivators. Jen is a natural connector who enjoys bringing people together to really build these wonderful partnerships. She works across cannabis producers and food cultivators, which affords her the opportunity to collaborate with the most innovative farms globally. She serves on Farm Tech Society's advisory board and sits on the board of Cultivation, an autonomous cultivation company in the cannabis market, and she's an advisor to Farm One, Manhattan's only commercial vertical farm. So welcome, Jen. And the first question to you, so that I can actually stop talking here, is what is the current status of New York's cannabis market, and how and when should prospective growers or investors dive into this growing market?
Thank you. And thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. So it's a really unique time in cannabis right now. We're situated also in a really unique state. As probably a lot of folks on the call know, the cannabis market across the country is experiencing an extreme slowdown, from price drops to the high cost of capital to the high cost of inflation to construction costs and to supply chain issues, everyone's starting to scratch their head and say, what is going on with this market? We are in a really ground floor opportunity. It's very unique in New York. We're poised to be the biggest market globally. And I think also, so for me, I'm also a New Yorker. And so I think it's really exciting. It's also interesting because we can capitalize on the learnings of other states who have legalized before us. I was just reading in the New York Times, Mayor Adams proposed that the city invest $4.8 million next year in the local cannabis industry, which is expected to generate $1.3 billion in the first year of legal sales. I mean, this is a number that doesn't really add up when you think about this massive slowdown, and that I think spurs even more excitement. Just to give you a little background on the New York State, kind of what's going on with licensing. A couple months ago, the state rolled out the cultivation regs, which dictate what one needs to do to apply for a license. To date, they have already granted roughly 230 licenses to cultivators, and investors are really starting to circle the wagons to figure out, are they going to back these cultivators, or are they going to become operators themselves? So that, I think, also is pretty unique about what's going on. In terms of guidance and timelines for growers to enter the market, it's a little bit of a cat and mouse scenario. We're waiting for the regs to be released, but yet we're seeing in the meantime that people are really gearing up. They're building teams, they're sussing out real estate, they're talking to municipalities, they're lining up vendors, all to be poised and ready for the second these regs drop. I think it's really a circumstantial decision based on one's own capital, their risk tolerance, and their experience in the market. Based on Fluence's perspective, and what we're seeing is a lot of early, well-coordinated, sophisticated players that are taking large stakes across New York. You touched on a little bit about us, but just to talk for a minute about Fluence, we've been in this industry since 2012. We work across both greenhouse and indoor, and we are in every state and country where cannabis is legal, both on the medical side and the adult side. We're based in Texas and we manufacture there, which means we haven't really seen a lot of supply chain issues as compared to the industry. And then we're really focused on New York. So when we're talking to all the players who are coming to New York or are recent license winners, and at the core of our vision is that we really want to help these growers every step of the way build their operations and also help build the foundation for the industry.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was really helpful information. So working also with Jennifer Bassuk is Ryley Leech from Fluence, and he is the Cannabis Solutions Architect, as I mentioned earlier. And he's a seasoned cannabis professional who brings more than 10 years of experience from medical and recreational markets to Fluence. After working in really every facet of the industry, Ryley now uses his intimate knowledge of the cannabis space to assist new companies in forming their business plans and their go-to-market strategies, while advising growers on facility design, cultivation strategies, equipment vetting, and extraction SOPs. He's also an experienced cultivator in indoor, greenhouse, and broad-scale outdoor settings with a focus on extracted end products. Prior to Fluence, he co-founded Endocanna Labs in Colorado and Terra Pharma in Kentucky. His cultivation experience yielded a particularly high level of understanding of cannabis plant metabolites and how to maximize production for extraction and therapeutic values. So welcome, Ryley. And
thank you very much, Jill.
For you, we'd love to hear all about the science and everything. I love your pictures behind you too.
Yeah.
Kind of speaks to it all. So as we enter a brand new recreational market in New York, and based on your experience as a cultivator, what business strategies can entrepreneurs lean on for success?
Sure. I think, as we look at a new market with new opportunity, I think it's important to, like Jen said, look at the mature markets and learn as much as you can from them. And, some of the things that are plaguing the West Coast and some of the more mature markets are, unavoidable at this point in time with high taxes and some of the legislative or the regulations that are around these cultivation and dispensary facilities. But in terms of, how to build a cannabis business, I think, a lot of people are looking at what others are doing and emulating in a way that becomes negative. I believe that you want to, like any other business, build a brand that stands out and has its own mission and plan, and you follow, your own passion in this industry. And, just because you may not have started a cultivation facility before, but you can still build off your experience, your life experience, your vision of the brand, and kind of roll that out. And I think that's where unique brands win in this space. Everyone who is trying to do what other people are doing is struggling to keep up with the brands that are leading. So I would say, number one, branding, stand out, do something unique. And then number two is find, if you don't have experience in either cultivation or retail or, extraction, I think it's important to find companies and people that you can partner with to give you that expertise. So whether it be Fluence in the cultivation and lighting sense, or, working with consultants on specific extraction SOPs or cultivation SOPs, or even down to post-processing and packaging and retail. I mean, there's experts in each one of these fields, and there's people who have done this across the country. And I would look to find the best and brightest and bring them in to at least assist you as you start to build your brand. I think, long gone are the days where we can set up really inefficient cannabis businesses and just be able to be profitable because the price per pound is so high, and it doesn't matter if we're, growing at $1,500 per pound. Now we need to be economical. We need to be efficient businesses. And the more you set that up from day one, the easier you're going to transition and continue to be efficient throughout the lifespan of your business. So there's not one little thing we can skip. This is farming, and it's consumer goods, and it's everything that's very difficult to build an efficient business in. So the devil's in the details.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Kaelan. Welcome, Kaelan.
Thank you.
Kaelan Castetter is the managing director of Castetter Cannabis Group, and has been in the New York cannabis industry since 2015. So you're not a newbie like many of the rest of us. As the founder of Sovereign Vines, America's only hemp-infused wine, a restart of his father's venture from 1997. Over the past several years, he has led large-scale hemp cultivation operations that included 16 farms throughout New York. He was also the CEO of Empire Standard, in charge of building out a compliant cannabinoid hemp manufacturing operation in Binghamton. And he's now the managing director of the Castetter Cannabis Group, an advisory firm focused on helping entrepreneurs understand complex regulations, developing sound strategies for market entrance, and providing government relations to municipal, legislative, and regulatory bodies. He's a co-founder of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, the state's largest trade group, where he now serves as a consultant, developing policy suggestions on behalf of more than 400 members. So welcome again, Kaelan. And upstate New York has many former manufacturing hubs, communities that are willing to be creative to bring jobs and industry back to their areas. How does cannabis fit into these communities? And what are your clients focused on also in terms of cultivations? We have kind of, two things here, jobs, and then also, the focus in the cultivation area.
Yeah, well, so, cannabis presents an interesting opportunity through a controlled environment, growing in agriculture because the quality of product in terms of flower needs to be, so high, especially when you're competing with an already developed and ingrained illicit marketplace, right? So, the standards of quality that New Yorkers have are pretty high. And so while I think there's going to be a lot of, traditional type of growing of cannabis, similar to how you would grow market vegetables throughout New York State and in our more rural and agricultural areas of the state, specifically Western New York and parts of Central New York. But I also think there's an opportunity for places such as Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, Binghamton, Jamestown, places like in Orange County outside of Albany, where, you have a tradition of, agricultural economies, but you have warehouse space and industrial space with the type of water and power needs necessary to grow, controlled environment cannabis, right? So I think now there's that opportunity to engage in those communities where, many of them had businesses in the tech industry up until, a couple of decades ago, or, everyone knows about Kodak and what happened in Rochester and all those jobs leaving there. Well, there's a chance to replace jobs and be closer to communities that, were so over-policed and affected by the war on drugs. There's now, hopefully going to be job opportunities for them, within their communities, and it won't be a situation where they have to be in these rural areas. So cannabis is unique where it's going to present, those type of opportunities for those communities. And the other, aspect of that is the cost of energy, water and real estate. And in some places in upstate New York, they can be very, very competitive with other places in the country, and certainly a lot less expensive than trying to set up those type of operations in the New York City area or in New York City. So, we have this insular economy where, there's borders around the marketplace. You can't import cannabis products into New York State as of now. And so, we'll see the types of opportunities, in these communities, with businesses entering and investing, tens of millions of dollars and creating thousands of jobs throughout the state. And I think that's really exciting as we look at some of these larger scale operations, but also the micro businesses and the smaller operations where we're looking at 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet of cultivation and light manufacturing, distribution, and potentially even retail. So I think it's really nice to see a lot of leaders in our upstate cities. No cities in New York opted out, and it's good to see them kind of lean in to accepting cannabis businesses into their communities.
Sure. Thank you very much. So what would you say, Ryley, back to you, what would you say are the top 3 considerations that one should have in mind when attempting to create a new indoor or greenhouse cultivation?
Sure. So like I said before, if you don't have experience, I think the top 3 is one of the top 3 is talent. I won't list them in order,
Okay.
but I'll consider the top 3. You need talent and direction, right? Like I said before, we aren't going to have in New York, especially with the way that the regulations are looking to shape up early, at least. You're not going to have the ability to have the $4,500 per pound, where that leeway that for you to be inefficient and learn your way, right? You're going to need to start the facility at a highly successful, highly efficient, and repeatable cultivation facility. And with that, I mean, the easiest way to do that is an indoor facility that's well lit. And highlight using the latest technology and relying on people who have experience cultivation at the scale that you're at. So that would be number 1. I would think that's going to be really important. And as we look at greenhouse versus indoor, lighting, environment, all those things become really dynamic. So the other thing too is that you don't want to cut corners on these controlled environment facilities. These are expensive facilities to build out. They require high level HVAC, dehumidification, lighting, electrical structure. They're production facilities. They're not necessarily just the upscale basement kind of style grow. So the capital that you need to bring to the table for indoor and high-tech greenhouse facilities has to be serious, so that's going to be two. And then number three, like I said before, is developing a brand strategy around your cultivation, right? So as you start your facility in New York, you're going to either source genetics from somewhere or develop your own genetics through seed hunting and phenotype hunting, and really looking for what is going to be the staple of your brand, which is your genetics, your cultivars, the things that you grow, right? So just like we look at Driscoll's for strawberries coming off the West Coast, like what is your brand going to be known for? And that's, I think, a strategy that oftentimes people just go to the West Coast, see what the hottest thing is, and try to get that over into their cultivation facility. And that's not a problem, because that is part of what the market is asking for. Market trends are important to pay attention to. However, I do think the more you follow that trend, the less you're going to be able to differentiate yourself from your competitors, and have a challenge when the market really starts to open up. And with the potential 200 hemp licenses coming out, with the outdoor and all this stuff, differentiating is going to be important, because there's going to be a lot of the market is moving faster than in most states, right? More often than not, we see 10 licenses released, and then another 10 or 30, and then we start to grow step by step. In New York, we're going to go pretty fast towards a different kind of style of the market. So it's important to have that consideration, understand what is going to when the doors open, what's going to happen. So I think those would be my top three considerations.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ryley. So Bradley, we haven't had a chance to see you yet, but I look forward to introducing you to everyone here. Brad is a project developer at Arco Murray National Construction Company, a national design build contractor working with clients to provide value engineered solutions for nationwide rollouts and client specific operational requirements. He's worked with state and local economic councils, planning boards, utility providers, and engineering departments to secure entitlements, permits, utility demands, and incentives for millions. His projects have included warehouses, controlled environments, greenhouses, vertical farms and indoor cultivation, entertainment facilities, and multifamily developments. Brad prioritizes strategizing economic growth for developers, tenants, and local governments. So welcome, Brad. So a question for you. Is what sort of considerations are top of mind for cannabis companies prioritizing cultivation during site selection?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I appreciate being here. And Jill, thanks for having me. And Jen, thanks for the invite too from Fluence to be part of this today. So the site selection is the biggest thing that is the top of a lot of people's list once they get those licenses in New York, is where can I actually start my cultivation at, whether that be an existing facility or a greenfield where they're building up from the ground and designing around all of their specific parameters. And the three things that have really come top of their list in site selection, the first of which is utilities. Is the capacity there for them to service their needs? And that's water, sanitary, and power. Those three things are kind of the holy trinity of utilities. Gas is thrown in there every so often, depending on how you're going to heat the system or possible secondary power generation. But first and foremost is making sure that whether it be a local utility that can provide that water need, or if you're going to have to do some kind of well investigation and water rights on your property. And the second in the utility space is power. making sure that the local provider, whoever it may be in the state of New York, can deliver your demand on a regular basis to the capacity that you need and at the service rates that you're looking for. A lot of the locations that we're looking at for our clients are pretty remote, and the transmission lines to those properties haven't been developed enough to provide some of those services. So looking in conversations with the providers on what their timelines to extension or even cost to extension would be our top of mind on site selection. The second item that comes up on looking at sites is the actual site conditions. Your location to your market that you anticipate supplying to, location or proximity to distribution networks, whether that be interstate highways or local roadways to get to those interstate highways. The other part of site conditions is the topography. Is the existing site conditions preventing you from actually building the size of facility you're looking to do? Are you going to spend an extensive amount of earthwork costs to level that site out and get it suitable to just start construction? State of New York is rolling hills across the place, and a lot of the existing greenfield sites do have a lot of site constraints to them, whether that be the topography or possible wetlands or forested areas of development. So working through what the timeframes to clearing those wetlands, clearing the site, or bringing the site to a flat grade are going to be a pretty big consideration for greenfield selection. And then the third item is time to market. How quickly can we purchase a site and start my cultivation? How quickly can I get my first crop out of that facility? Existing facilities that I need to do some renovations to are obviously going to be a little bit quicker, but there's going to be more costs associated with getting that facility up and running, making sure it has the right utilities, the right clearance for plants and grow rooms. Greenfield sites are great because there's a lot of room available for you to develop to your needs. But again, the time to market is going to be a little bit longer because you have to do the grading on that site, get the entitlements, get the permitting to develop. So a lot of the time to market comes to working with local municipalities on what their entitlement timeframe is going to be to allow for cannabis cultivation, but also allow for the construction of that facility to take place. Anything that delays that process is going to mark that site down on the site selectors list and enable them to move to a different location because it's going to be outside of their fiscal planning years of when their first crop is going to go to market and get revenue off that crop.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So more on, discussion, of course, of growth and cultivation. So back to you, Ryley. How would you characterize New York's climate for greenhouse production? And are there any specific considerations that New York growers should keep in mind?
Yeah, so and Kaelan can probably speak to this too with his experience in hemp. There's definitely some areas in New York with great light for 6-7 months of the year for solid greenhouse production as well as outdoor production. So in terms of is a greenhouse in New York viable? Absolutely. The one problem around the current regulations is the 20 light regulation around greenhouses. So that's saying, up to 25,000 square feet, you can have 20 lights. Well, that's one, 1,000-watt fixture per 100 square feet. That's essentially enough light to keep the plants awake. It's not necessarily enough light to, improve or provide supplemental lighting to match production levels that you see year round. So the biggest concern that I have with the kind of plan around a lot of the hemp farmers and greenhouse growers is that with a new market, you're going to need constant supply. You need consistent quality, high quality supply, like Kaelan was referring to, and with the seasonality that you see in greenhouse, which is and especially with outdoor, you're going to be looking at 1 to 2 crops at a high level of production per year, outdoor, and similar indoor or similar in greenhouse. So without having a higher level of supplemental lighting, essentially these greenhouses are going to produce, sometimes 50, 75, 80% less in the winter months than they would in the summer months. So it's going to create a supply and quality constraint in the market, which I have a big concern about, because part of this is to move people away from the legacy market in New York and get them into the legal market and start generating tax dollars and jobs and all these things. But when we have a quality and a supply issue that the legacy market doesn't have, you're going to have your most important consumers of cannabis, who are the people who use it every day and who have a history of using it, potentially turning back to that legacy market because they don't have what they need in the legal market. So if greenhouses are properly outfitted with levels of supplemental lighting that can allow them to make up the difference in sunlight that they get in that 3 or 4 or 5 months of the year that aren't as good, then it can be a very viable solution. But at the moment, I think there's going to be some challenges.
Great, thank you. Brad, what's the utility demand for the average cannabis cultivator, and do you expect it to be any different in the New York market?
So I don't expect too much of a difference in the New York market compared to other places, even like Texas or Colorado or other states that have been growing for a while now. But the typical demand that we see on the water side is anywhere from about 40 to 50,000 or 40 to 60,000 gallons per day of water, with a pretty high recycle rate. I mean, 20%, 10 to 20% of recycled water can come out of that. That can get back fed into the system as long as it has the right filtration system and everything incorporated into it. Power on the other side is a lot more variable. Water is too, but power is very variable depending on the lighting conditions, the equipment, the automation that you have inside the facility. A lot of the things that make a lot of the cultivators unique and their sales point is how they grow. And that's using automation, using the genetics, or just their grow process, whether it be aquaponics or other methods of drip irrigation that they're using, which can conserve on water. And then automation can increase your power demands. So on the power side of things, we see anywhere from about 5 megawatts to upwards of 20 megawatts on some of these facilities that range to about 100,000 square feet. And that large discrepancy between the two numbers is due to the heavy automation that some of these users want to implement into their system to get more product out the door, but again, results in higher costs that you're paying to utility providers on a monthly basis, but also the upstart cost of delivering said power to the location. We're finding all types of new solutions, whether it be higher efficiency lights from Fluence or from other methods of production of that power. Solar is one option. It's not as powerful as a lot of people like to think, but it does offset some of those grid power concerns. CHP or cogen facilities on site are a great option that allow you to supplement your grid power, but you're paying an up cost on procuring that equipment, getting a gas line to provide the fuel for the cogen plant, but you're able to get some supplementary power as well as use the heat off those systems to heat your space or heat your water to the actual facility. So there's kind of efficiency benefits of putting that system in, especially if the local provider of power can't get you the full demand that you're looking for. So we spend a lot of time with our clients going back and forth and analyzing what kind of automation or growing operations they want to have and what that results in a power and water function and what the local providers can get to the site.
Okay, great. Kaelan, how should cultivators who are new to this process, and there's obviously so many things to consider from, energy to climate, regulations, what should they be thinking about in the New York market with respect to compliance?
Yeah, so the first thing is that if you are a conditional cultivator, and so the only licensed cultivators in the state are adult use conditional cultivators, meaning they had grown hemp previously for 2 years, you can only use up to 20 lights, right? So, and those lights also have energy efficiency requirements. So only certain lighting fixtures can be used. So that's one of the first things to think about. That's subject to change and kind of at the board discretion. So we'll see through guidance whether that gets expanded. There's also square footage caps, and whether you're just growing outdoors or growing in a greenhouse or a mixture of both, you have to maintain square footage. And in order to report to the OCM exactly how much square footage you're using, you have to send them a plant bed diagram, and they have a very specific way they calculate canopy space. So they have, the Office of Cannabis Management provides a lot of, good kind of templates to use for the plant bed diagram. Other thing is that you are required to track and trace, all your plants and everything you're growing. However, the state has not selected a provider for track and trace yet. So you're required to do this on your own. You're also required to maintain records in terms of all the inputs that you're using on your plants and when you're doing so, any sort of pesticide use that's within the allowable compliance, cleaning of equipment, and documenting all that. So this can get very difficult, especially for a small time cultivator. We identified that early, and it's basically a situation where you need a compliance officer on site. Now that doesn't work, and as Ryley mentioned earlier, you have to operate as a regular business and understand how to be profitable in an environment that's very difficult. The market's volatile, and then on top of it, you have some pretty significant tax consequences being associated with growing cannabis or selling cannabis. So we found that software solutions are usually the best way to go and to manage compliance. We work and we built out a bunch of templates with GreenSpace. It's a new software platform to help you track and trace and manage all this. Because really the state on one end is pushing for smaller businesses and smaller cultivators, but yet layering on a bunch of compliance requirements that also, by the way, change based on guidance, based on updated FAQs and public comments, assessment to public comments. And so it's definitely a challenging environment, and you need help, whether that's in the form of a consultant. Unfortunately, I think a lot of attorneys, don't fully understand some of the regulatory compliance and changing, but yet that can be very costly if you're using an attorney for all your regulatory compliance. So you either want to bring it in house, or you want to use maybe an attorney, a consultant, and some sort of software solution. And if anyone wants to reach out and learn more about GreenSpace, I'm happy to explain that. But it's a challenging environment, and it's something that I think a lot of legacy cultivators aren't used to, and then a lot of farmers aren't used to that level of scrutiny and compliance.
Thank you. So earlier we spoke a bit about jobs. I think it was Kaelan. And so fortunately for New York, the cannabis industry is projected to create tens of thousands of jobs in New York. What sort of training and preparation is needed to ensure that growers can optimize facilities for success? Ryley.
Sure. Like I've touched on a couple of times, I believe that, you're going to want to bring in a sophisticated cultivation professional, whether that be you, that might be you starting your business, you have experience in, cultivating hemp and in processing that, and you're going to move into THC. That's great. I think, a grower is only as good as he is a manager, right? We always say growers are glorified janitors because we always want to keep everything clean, but at the same time, you have to be a fantastic manager. You have to be able to understand how to train employees to do what you do, because as you scale up, there's only one of you, and then there's, however many employees are going to work under you, and they have to be an extension of you in that cultivation facility. So I would say, really focus in on if you've in speaking to what Kaelan was just saying, it's like, you need to really detail out everything that you do in cultivation on a day by day and week by week basis, so that one, you understand how everything is going to flow, your cost of production. And then 2, you can train other people to learn your cultivation style or your consultant's cultivation style, or whoever it may be that you're bringing in to provide this guidance. And then from there, like I said, if you're going into new technologies or if you're learning something new, I think it's important to partner with companies that are going to supply you with the equipment, but also supply you with the knowledge of how to use that. So, when you work with us at Fluence, you get access to our horticulture support team. We work with over 500, commercial cannabis facilities across North America. And, that provides us with a level of understanding about how to have the best crop performance under our lighting, and that goes for pretty much every piece of equipment that you're going to buy, right? You want to have HVAC and dehumidification professionals. You want to have irrigation professionals. You want to have, extraction professionals that when you're buying that equipment. So lean on the groups that you're making these large CapEx spends with. They need to also be able to provide you with the sophistication to help you be successful. And I think that's really important as you look to partner with companies and grow your business.
Okay, great. So, Kaelan, a hot topic in cannabis in New York at the moment, in states with more mature cannabis markets, tightening margins and rising price pressures have made it difficult, as we've discussed throughout this webinar, for small businesses to compete. How is New York's regulatory structure anticipating these challenges, and how should communities approach investing in sprouting cannabis businesses?
Yeah, so I think New York has taken the approach that they don't want, vertically integrated businesses. So, you either pretty much have to choose the production side of the supply chain or the retail side. In most states, what you have is a lot of vertically integrated operators where, when you go to a dispensary, the products that are available are grown and produced, manufactured by that same company. Right. And that does limit competition. That allows, those stores to have, much cheaper prices. So the idea is to separate those tiers out to create more opportunities and more licenses available for a larger amount of entrepreneurs and businesses, and to, reduce that kind of consolidation and to kind of protect that wholesale market for the producers. There's a carve out there for micro businesses. And, some micro businesses will probably follow a similar path that a farm brewery or farm winery or craft brew, microbrew, whatever sort of licensed tier in the state ABC laws allow for, basically allowing you to be vertically integrated, but capping the amount of production that you can do, right? So, it'd be really interesting to see how those operations build out throughout the state. And the other thing too is no overlapping ownership, right? And I think the state is very strict with that, for better or for worse from an investment perspective. But you cannot own multiple licenses. You can't have any ownership in multiple licenses in New York State. And so again, that's going to hopefully restrict consolidation and prevent consolidation, or at least that's the intent of the regulators. Furthermore, it's not a limited licensing state necessarily, but as we've seen, they're already limiting canopy size, right? And I think that we can expect that they're going to limit the amount of production through canopy size allotments to licensees. And so hopefully, the hope there is that you don't have a massive oversupply. I think what the state should also be focusing on, and I'm sure some are at the OCM, but you don't really see it in a lot of the proposed regulations to date, is lowering the barrier to compliance and the barrier. If we're going to say that cannabis is not necessarily a public health issue in the hands of adults, then we should regulate it like other products that we feel the same, such as alcohol. And if you were to regulate cannabis exactly like alcohol, without a lot of burdensome compliance requirements, you would cut the costs significantly for operators, and you would allow operators to gain more of a profit. And so I think that's going to be an ongoing fight and an ongoing process throughout the next few years. And that's why we as a firm, engage in a lot of government relations and policy development work on behalf of our clients and explaining to regulators exactly, how some of what they do, even if it's well-intentioned, may affect operators and the bottom line. Because at the end of the day, we talk about creating wealth opportunities for communities and entrepreneurs that have been marginalized and targeted by the war on drugs. Well, the opportunity has to be there for them to make money, right? And to be able to put that money away. That's generational wealth. It's not just having a great top line business and and not making money year over year. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a process. There's some parts of the New York regulatory structure that I think are excellent, and some that I think will need to be changed continually.
Thanks for that. I see also that we do have a few questions, and we do have two more questions for our panelists to answer. So we might not have time to answer the questions in this webinar, but I will share them with our panelists, and we will get back to you, unless we find that in what they're answering, they'll have a moment to also get to answering some of those questions. But for now, my next question is for Brad. Many first-time growers aren't familiar with the timeline for a new cannabis facility. Starting at day one, what does the entitlement permitting process look like from initial meeting to design to construction?
Yeah, so this is a hard answer to give because it varies completely on the municipality that you're building in. They're going to dictate how many different entitlements you need to go through, what kind of concurrencies on building permit or just general entitlement would need to happen on the property before you could even submit for a building permit. So what I can kind of give an overview on is what the typical process looks like and show that there is some variability in it. So from initial kind of conceptual design or the start off of knowing the property or knowing the site, it's usually about a 3 to 4 month design process. And in that time frame, we hope to have full construction set of drawings put together, as well as all the feedback we need from the client on what their systems are going to be. If there's going to be iterations of different automation systems that might be put in or lighting systems, all of that will kind of push out the schedule because those decisions need to be made for us to settle on the final design for the electrical utility systems or just the general building layout. But typically we like to get that process done within a 3 to 4 month time frame. Maybe a month before that, we're just having conceptual designs put together so that we have an idea of what the space might look like or how we might develop the site and can start initial conversations with the municipality on what that process for entitlements and permitting will be. And then from there, we can build a schedule that makes sense for that municipality and for the client to make their decisions, for us to get construction drawings and get that permit in hand. Overall, I think we see the process typically take about 6 to 8 months from initial kind of conceptual conversations to getting a permit, getting through entitlements, and starting some of that earthwork. We've also seen the process take up to 12 to 18 months, and that's with a heavier site that has more entitlements, maybe wetlands or utilities need to be upgraded and delivered to the property. So there's a lot of variability in that process, but having the decisions made up front on the systems or how you're going to cultivate, how your interior layouts are going to be, are going to help expedite the conversations and the design aspect of getting any kind of submittals into those municipalities. And if there's any municipalities on the call today or anyone talks to them, the shorter the process they can put together or the more conversation we can have on the process up front is going to expedite that lead time. And that goes back to my conversation on time to market. That's another big item that they look for on sites. And if we can shorten that time to market, it's going to decrease the carrying costs and everything else up front to actually start construction and get your first crop out of that facility.
Great, thank you. So Jen, I think it's back to you, and we started and we'll finish off with you, this being the last question. The New York State statute regulating cannabis specifically mentions sustainability, which we know will be a key consideration in licensing. In the face of outdated narratives about the lack of sustainability in controlled environment agriculture, how can we leverage new technology to build sustainable facilities?
Sure. Thanks, Jill. So you mentioned earlier about our mission at Fluence. So our mission is to improve the interaction of light and life to yield a healthier, more sustainable world. These are not just words on a page, but actual mandates in how we design our technology and the lens in which we approach our work and our partnerships. And other folks in the ecosystem of controlled environment agriculture also have this lens. And I think it's, first of all, important to think about who you're partnering with and what, how their technology is built and what they stand for. But also when you think about a grow, and when I say a grow, for those that may not be familiar on the call, a cultivation facility, that's an entire ecosystem. Okay, so if you make one change, that can cascade, into many other changes in the ecosystem. So from a sustainability standpoint, there are several factors to take into account, such as Kaelan mentioned earlier, water and waste, and Ryley touched on HVAC, and we also have to think about plug loads and lighting, among many other things. In fact, lighting is the most energy intensive of them all. So thinking about lighting, then as the most energy intensive, you need to start there and think, well, how can I find a more energy efficient light? So an LED light is more energy efficient than the old technology, which is called HPS or high pressure sodium. They're sort of like the street lights that you'll see outside. So if you then use LEDs, this will create cooler temperatures in the grow. That means that you don't need to use as much HVAC. So it's already sort of flowing down the system. Using LEDs produces about a 40% reduction in electricity, which then will lend to a 40% reduction in HVAC loads. And we typically see this again, like when you make this one adjustment, then that will lend to several other eco benefits that you'll experience. One thing also to consider is, sort of outside of the actual grow, who you're partnering with in terms of utilities. So there are utilities across the country that have sustainability programs that will result in more efficient grows, as well as millions of dollars in rebates back to growers for using sustainable equipment. And what we've seen is that, I've sort of said it a few times, one change will inspire other changes in the grow. And when you take that into account, so you're changing your lighting, that affects your HVAC and so on, you can actually have an efficiency of more than 25%. And we've got a lot of research that we can share after this call along those lines. But I also want to share an example, sort of a layman's example for the audience. So if you think about a commercial grow's energy use is the equivalent of taking all the lights in Yankee Stadium. So think about, for those who are New Yorkers and have been to Yankee Stadium, take all those lights and then put them into a Duane Reade. So your average Duane Reade is about 13,000 square feet. So if you then replace so consider that those lights were the old technology. If you replace all those lights in that Duane Reade using LEDs, that will produce the same carbon reduction as taking 420 cars off the road each year. And so the math checks out. We've done this. 420 is a coincidence with cannabis and 420. But it's an interesting stat. And like going along with this baseball example, I'll leave you with one other thought. Like great players win games and great teams win championships. And we really want to team up with all the New York growers to knock this out of the park. A little cheesy, but it's where we really stand on this point.
I really like that, Jen, and I'm a huge baseball fan, and I think I'm sure you'll hit it out of the park for sure. So I just want to thank all the very knowledgeable panelists that were here today to talk about growth and cultivation in New York, which is certainly a hot topic. If anyone would like to send me questions to forward to Jen, you certainly can. I did get a few that came in that I'll share with the team here. Jen, how would the attendees reach out to you directly if they're interested in learning
Sure.
more about, this topic? Because I'd love for them to know that. And before you share that with them, I do want to let everyone know that we will have the webinar series made available. So we'll have part 1 that we're releasing later today, and this will be recorded and edited and then released so everyone can refer back to it. So Jen, how would the attendees reach out to you?
So first, I want to thank you, Jill, and Schneps Media, and also Politics New York for allowing us this opportunity to talk to folks about cultivation. I also want to thank Kaelan and Brad for joining us and contributing all of their knowledge. I think it was great to hear their viewpoints. If anybody has questions for any of the panelists, feel free. You can reach out to any of us directly through our LinkedIn. If you'd like to have a more centralized location, you're welcome to email me. My email is jen.bassuk, BASSUK @fluence.science. And I think, Jill, when the transcript goes out, it'll see all of our social media handles as well as our email. So folks can absolutely reach out to any of us. We, all have a team approach here, and happy to talk to everyone.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here today, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.